Last week, Tim Hayes showed us a white-tailed deer mount that he had been working on. It's one that was called a wall pedestal mount, a little different pose, but it's also one that had an exquisite amount of detail, more detail than you see in most mounts.
It's also got what they call a Fleming nose, where the mouth is partially open and the deer's curling his nose up like he's smelling.
The other thing, it has kind of wrinkles on top of its nose.
When a deer sniffs, it pulls its nose up, and quite often the deer likes to keep its nose wet, so it's always sticking its tongue up there and licking its nose, and the tongue would come up and actually go right inside the nostrils and pull back down and then come up so that it can smell better. And when it smells, it pulls its nose up, and you get the slight wrinkling effect on the bridge.
Now, those kind of details can be put into a mount if the taxidermist is observant of nature and knows about those details. See, those things happen so quickly in nature that a lot of people don't see them. In fact, I'm going to show you some of those same behaviors in the next 50 seconds. We're going to roll tape. You're going to see deer of 3 different ages, and let me see how much you can observe. Now, this buck is a special one. His name is Jose. For 16 years, Jose was the pet deer of Lou and Doris Pittman of Brooklyn. Now, in these scenes, Jose is on his last legs, but for the most part, he functions like any buck would. Now, here's Shadow Buck in the woods just before he severely injured his back chasing does to breed. Well, Shadow looked like a lost cause, but Rick Bears didn't want to give up. They called in a chiropractic veterinarian because it was obvious that Shadow had a spinal dislocation. But the question was, could a wild animal like this recover from that kind of injury? Because animals, don't really have a good concept of taking it easy for rehabilitation. But during his last days, Shadow functioned as best he could. And here's one of Shadow's offspring, functioning like the rest. Well, I know I was talking through that, maybe diverting your attention, but did you notice all the times that the deer licked their noses and actually put their tongues into their nostrils? Well, we're going to go back and look at that in slow motion. You're going to be amazed how frequently they do that. And even, remember Tim Hayes talked about that fleamening where they curl up their lip to sense if their doe is in heat. Well, one of those bucks did that too. Let's take a look at it in slow-mo. Jose demonstrates that the tongue is quicker than the eye. A quick lick just to wet the nose. It's moisture that carries scents and brings out odors more intensely. Now here's a big lick. Oh yeah, that's what Tim Hayes was talking about, getting the tongue over and even in the nostril for picking up scent better. Now the left nostril, then the right. Now for the nose wrinkling called fleamening. Here's the normal nose and the wrinkling. You notice he sticks his tongue out after the wrinkling, but the pose that's classic is that wrinkled nose, mouth partly opened, followed by a lick. Now this nose licking is constant, but it's so fast it's easy to miss. From 16-year-old Jose to 7-year-old Shadow, who does just a little tiny lick. They do this all the time to keep their noses wet, just little licks to keep the nose sharp so they can pick up various signals from the wind. Now, the nose licking gets more aggressive when there's danger around, like when the chiropractic veterinarian came for an adjustment. Shadow couldn't move on his own. He was frantically licking his nose, big swipes with the tongue to help him monitor any scent messages in the air. Now, what kind of scents is he sniffing for? Well, anything that could give him clues of the nature of the danger he might be in. Even when he's subdued by people he's familiar with, he licks over and over, tongue across the nostril. From the 7-year-old Shadow Buck to one of his 6-month-old fawns, same behavior, tongue curls over the nostril. It's a constant behavior of deer of all ages. So, when taxidermist Tim Hayes showed us how deer use their tongues on their noses, he wasn't kidding. He's observed this behavior on wild deer. And when he mounted Roger Vrabel's buck with a wrinkled nose and mouth in a fleamening posture, it's also something that he's seen bucks do during breeding season. I bet you didn't realize that a deer's tongue and its nose work so closely together. By the way, Tim Hayes, I told you I noticed that tongue thing on the deer by slowing down the tape as I was looking through it and noticing that the deer did that a lot. I could only see it in slow motion. Well, I was looking through some other tape